Hi, Braden, Dasan, and Martin. All right, today is the last e-learning day for this week, and then we get to be officially on spring break. Are we excited? I know I am. All right, so yesterday you guys listened to me read about transportation and communication revolutions, and you should have sent me a selfie showing that you'd finished the video. Today, I'm going to read the article to you about the effects of the Industrial Revolution, and then you are going to complete a Google form, which is in Google Classroom. All right, so there will be 15 questions. Make sure you answer them all. Make sure you press submit when you are done with it, and then you'll be good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up the article. I did attach the article to this material in Google Classroom if you need to go back and look over anything, but you don't have to turn anything in with this. You just have to complete the Google form after listening to me read this article, okay? So I'm going to show you my screen so that way you can follow along with what I'm reading. All right, so we're looking at the effects of the Industrial Revolution. Okay, so what happened because we had an Industrial Revolution? All right, we're going to start with economic and social changes. The Industrial Revolution created massive economic and social changes in every nation. In the United States and other countries, the middle class made rapid economic progress. Some invested in the new businesses or became managers. As customers, they benefited from the cheaper prices for clothing and other factory products. The need for engineers, accountants, managers, and other professionals led to an increase in education for middle-class students able to afford college. Many American colleges were built in the new Western states and financed by land grants. Colleges became the training grounds for a new class of professionals and business leaders. All right, now we're going to be on tenements. The growth of industry led to crowded cities as immigrants and others settled there to get work. Cities soon became filled with tenements. These apartments for working families were overcrowded, poorly built, filthy, and dangerous. So again, those are called tenements. Disease spread rapidly through these slum areas. Water had to be carried in buckets up the stairs to the apartments. Children slept 2 or 3 to a bed, and there was no privacy. Kerosene and coal were used for heating. Fires were commonplace and often destroyed entire blocks of apartments. Crime was a constant problem. Even though the American frontier was being populated by farmers, larger cities were growing even faster. By the end of the 19th century, the American frontier was settled, but most Americans lived in cities. In the first 50 years of the 20th century, Americans left the farms and moved to the cities for better job opportunities. By 1980, only a very small percentage of Americans lived on farms. All right, the working class. Factory workers labored or worked 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. They got Sundays off for religious reasons, but holidays and vacations were unheard of. There was no sick leave, and workers often lost their jobs if they did not show up to work, regardless of the reason. Contagious diseases spread in the cramped and unsanitary conditions of the factories. Accidents were common, and crippled workers simply lost their jobs, meaning if the machines hurt you, the company would fire you instead of, helping you to get better. Business owners kept wages as low as possible and docked a worker's pay for the smallest infractions, such as being a few minutes late, accidentally breaking a machine, or not working fast enough. Some owners even believed that higher wages would make workers lazy and unproductive. To dock a pay means that they're going to take money out of their paycheck. All right, child labor. Since there were no laws against children working in factories, boys and girls under 10 years old were routinely employed in textile mills, often in very dangerous jobs. Because they were small and agile, some children were used to run under machines and tie loose threads. Boys as young as 7 years old worked as doffers, replacing the bobbins of thread in textile factories. Girls of the same age worked as spinners, brushing lint from machines and tying broken threads. Many children developed spinal deformities, limps, and other physical injuries from their work. In coal mines, boys as young as 10 years old were allowed to work separating the slate and stone from the coal on moving troughs. Many fell into the river of coal and were mangled or killed. All had coughs from breathing the coal dust. At the age of 12, they graduated to work in the mines. Immigrant children worked along with their parents in canneries, shucking oysters, cutting beans, peeling apples and tomatoes, and processing other foods. Most child workers had no schooling. They worked 12 to 14 hours a day, just like the adults. School was not mandatory, and many families desperately needed the money their children earned in order to eat. Children earned less than half of what adult men were paid. All right, women in the factories. Many American farm girls, especially in New England in the early 1800s, worked in factories for a few years before they married. These working girls earned about $3 a week and had to pay for part of that for their room and board. Later, women and girls from immigrant families, as well as some American-born women, worked in textile factories to help support their families. They worked as long and as hard as the men, but were paid about half their wages. Unemployment. Severe depressions and business collapses in the 1870s and 1890s cost many people their jobs. Many families lived week to week, and a lost day for a worker meant less food on the table. Weeks and months of unemployment meant starvation and homelessness. Families lost their apartments when they could not pay the rent. Some families received charity from churches, but most simply suffered and tried to find whatever odd jobs they could, usually at an even lower pay. The steel industrialist Andrew Carnegie said, "The worker has no more to do with setting his wages than it does a piece of coal with setting its price." The attitude of business owners that workers could do nothing about their situation was usually accurate. Factory workers tried to organize unions throughout the 19th century, and especially in the 1890s, but they faced a severe uphill battle. Many workers were afraid of losing their jobs and therefore did not support unions. When the unions tried to strike, scabs, or unemployed workers, were brought in by the owners to take the jobs. Strikers were often beaten by hired thugs and professional strike breakers. Police and federal troops were sometimes used in large strikes to support the business owners. All right, no political support. Factory workers had little political influence for several reasons. Many legislators were bribed or had business interests of their own, which made them sympathetic to powerful trusts or businesses. Women, children, and immigrants could not vote. The workers who could vote did not have enough votes to make a difference. All right, so now we have a second industrial revolution. In the first half of the 20th century witnessed a second industrial revolution with massive growth in manufacturing due to new inventions, better transportation, and the impact of World War I and World War II. This second period of industrialization was also characterized by the rise of labor unions, which had political influence. The trusts were brought under control in part by President Theodore Roosevelt, whose tough policies limited their influence. He was concerned that these trusts exercised more authority than the U.S. government. Later, presidents like Franklin Delano Roosevelt, FDR, and Harry Truman also tried to limit the power of monopolies. The Great Depression in the 1930s made American voters distrustful of the powerful trusts and also led to legislation curtailing their influence or stopping their influence. Today, industrialization is on the rise in countries like China and India. In an attempt to reduce labor costs, many American and European companies are sending work to countries where laborers work for lower wages and fewer benefits. These workers often labor in poor conditions, similar to those during America's early industrial age. The process of industrialization may continue for decades as other countries encounter their own industrial revolutions. Okay, so that is all of the article for today. So now that you've listened to the entire article, you can go ahead and go out to Google Classroom, find the Industrial Era Revolutions, check for understanding, and complete the questions. All right, If I don't talk to any of you before we officially go on spring break, I hope you have a wonderful spring break, even if we all do kind of have to just stay in our homes, but it'll be good. I will talk to you guys after spring break. You enjoy yourselves, make sure you get your e-learning done, and you guys will have a great little vacation from school. All right, see you guys.